Hi, and welcome to The Public Good. This is Andrea O'Sullivan from Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG, which unites over 275 community organizations working to build a better Buffalo. We're delighted to join you every Tuesday at 1 p.m. on Facebook Live and 7 p.m. on Power 96.5 FM and Mix 1080 AM. Today we're joined by Megan Maloney DeZaldivar of the New York Immigration Coalition and Jennifer Connor of Justice for Migrant Families. We'll discuss their work to ensure rights, dignity, and justice for immigrant families in Western New York, including some current policy issues and some upcoming events and ways to join in their work. Don't forget to follow PPG on Facebook and Twitter, and you can always get great information on our website, ppgbuffalo.org. Sponsored in part by Aviva, real people who really care. You can watch videos from the Public Good, including our 3-question videos with our guests on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. And before we get started and turn to Megan and Jennifer, I have a few quick announcements of events coming up this week. First, tomorrow morning at 11 a.m., there will be a press conference to support the African Heritage Food Co-op, taking control of 238 Carlton Street. And this is a building that historically opened in 1876 as a grocery store, and the African Heritage Food Co-op is hoping to regain that space and bring a grocery store back to the Fruit Belt neighborhood. So if you want to support that, you can join them at 11 a.m. tomorrow at 238 Carlton Street. Then also tomorrow afternoon from 12 to 1:30 p.m., there will be a voter education event sponsored by the Voice Buffalo Accessibility Task Force. And that's going to look at the accessibility of voting machines, voting booths for people with disabilities. What are some of the challenges they face in participating in voting, and how can the Erie County Board of Elections work to overcome those? So that's a press conference education event tomorrow from 12 to 1:30 p.m., happening at the SEIU office at 2421 Main Street. And finally, an event that we're going to hear more about during our conversation. This Thursday, September 27th, we're going to be joined in Buffalo by Aviva Chomsky, who will be speaking about immigration and labor, looking at the historical perspective that the challenging issues we're going to talk about today on immigration are maybe not so brand new for our country. They have these historical roots that are important for us to look at. So that's going to happen at Trinity Episcopal Church at 371 Delaware Avenue on Thursday night at 7 p.m., and we'll talk more about that. So Megan and Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
And both of your organizations are actively working here in Western New York with immigrants and for immigrants and their families. And we'd love to just start and hear about what you're doing. We're so glad that in the last months, both of you have joined PPG as partners. So we just want to share out. So maybe Jennifer, will turn to you first to hear what is Justice for Migrant Families of Western New York, and what are you up to?
Thank you. So my name's Jennifer Connor. I'm a volunteer with Justice for Migrant Families Western New York, and I've been there since the beginning. We started in 2016. We're an all-volunteer grassroots organization based in Buffalo, New York. And as an organization, we have a mission to do accompaniment and direct support of undocumented families and organizing and advocacy on the issues that are affecting them. And so what does that mean? Accompaniment means that as people are interacting with immigration enforcement, they often want community members to accompany them and provide support at the various points, whether that is attending an appointment, going to court, or getting a visit in the detention center. And we'll come back to some of that later. Direct support has meant a lot of fundraising, but also things like rides and other types of support that any family would need. And organizing, I hope that our listeners know about organizing, but we're organizing to build power in the city and states to change the unjust systems that are so adversely affecting the undocumented community.
And can you share kind of what does the undocumented community tend to look like in the region? I'm sure it's very diverse. Are there places where most folks are from? What work are they doing? What brings them to Western New York? Any kind of detail?
Yeah, so yes, I certainly wouldn't want to characterize an undocumented family by one particular thing, but I can tell you there are, it's estimated there's about 5,000 undocumented people in our region, and many people come here to work. Many people come here because they just can't support their families at home, and want better lives for their family, and that's something that people have in common. And in the city, we find a lot of people do work in the city, but as well, there's a lot of people who work on farms in the region, especially dairy farms. So those are a few things about people we know.
Thank you. And Megan, I'd love to hear about New York Immigration Coalition, which I know is a statewide organization. Kind of who are you and what are you doing in Western New York as well?
Yeah, thank you. So as you said, my name is Megan Maloney Saldivar. I'm the manager of member engagement for the New York Immigration Coalition. The coalition has been around for over 30 years now. We're a statewide organization that does policy and advocacy work around immigrants' rights. So in what our membership is made up of is organizations. So we do a lot of coordination and a lot of policy analysis around lots of different issues that all different types of immigrants face. So we believe in a New York State where when immigrants are supported and their rights are protected, then everyone is going to thrive. So we do a lot of work on the statewide level, and then also more recently on the local level, and on the federal level as well. So we've, in the past 5 years, really tried to focus on doing better and actually being a statewide organization. So I'm based here in Buffalo. I have a counterpart in Syracuse and some in the Hudson Valley and Long Island. So while New York State is often painted as this very immigrant-friendly state, we know that the reality is that we are actually very far behind on a lot of different ways that we can protect immigrants better and where we can create a state and a city that immigrants can really thrive. So here in Buffalo, we do a lot of work both with the refugee resettlement agencies as well as grassroots organizations. And we also work regionally. So I am able to work both in the city of Buffalo, but also in the rural areas, and kind of be able to connect those. So it's, a diversity of issues. The way we kind of like to divide it up is issues that are around status and enforcement. So that has to do with who is able to come into this country, how are you able to change statuses, what are the ways that people try and take those statuses away, and how do you get into enforcement. And then on the other side, issues around people being able to succeed and being able to thrive while they're here. So that has more to do with issues around education, around language access, which is one of the huge issues that is very important here locally, but also around, other things like healthcare and access to healthcare and quality healthcare. So we have kind of a support team. A lot of them work in New York City that are supporting around the policy analysis. And then my role is really working with them and our member organizations to ensure that both we know what's going on and we're able to organize a response to things at the federal level, but also to bring issues up that we face locally.
And I think certainly both of you and your organizations would be saying at this moment that the national climate and the national conversation on immigration is discouraging at best and very worrying, to say the least. And so I would be interested to hear what are some of those recent changes, either active or proposed changes, that might be really starting to impact the lives of our immigrant neighbors here in Western New York.
Yeah, so I think, as you said, and one of the things that I think is always really important to highlight is that the attacks on immigrants in this country have, been very long standing. They look different in different times, and they look different for different immigrant communities. And I think regionally, one of the really important things that has changed very much how enforcement has happened is the Trump administration most recently. But before that really were some of the dramatic changes that happened after 9/11. So the huge increase in the Border Patrol presence in our region, that is something that happened after 9/11. And the amount of resources that Border Patrol has in our region and the amount of power that they have, that is very much related to the aftermath of 9/11. Obviously, right now, we've seen that over the years, the enforcement and deportation machine has been built up by lots of previous administrations, including the Obama administration. The Trump administration right now is carrying out a white supremacist agenda to what they think that this country should look like. So there have been a ton of different restrictions that they've tried, some more successful than others, to put on immigration. And while they say in the media that it is focused on stopping people who come here illegally, the reality is they are both attacking all legal forms of immigration as well as people who are coming here without permission. So over the weekend was one of the most recent attacks. So this is a rule change around what is called public charge. So we've heard about that this might be coming down for months. So I'll kind of just go over a little bit what is the meaning of this rule, who it affects and who it doesn't affect. But one of the really important things to just highlight and remember is that the reality is that this rule change is affecting families, and it's making families choose between being able to support their kids through, putting food on the table, or being able to have a pathway to an immigration status, which is a horrific choice that no family should have to be put in the place of. So public charge is a concept that has been around in immigration for decades. It's been defined in different ways through different laws and rules. So the change, and right now what is defined as in the rules, is that essentially a public charge is the idea that people who immigrate shouldn't be solely dependent on the state once they're here, right? So that is the idea behind the rule. And so the way that they evaluate that has looked different. And what it has looked like in the last few years is basically if you're applying to become a legal permanent resident, they look to see if you have used in the past cash benefits or if you have been in a long-term care facility. Those were the two things that were considered a public charge. But other types of support that you might have gotten by living in this country, like WIC or SNAP or Medicaid, were not considered a public charge. And so what this rule change does is essentially expands from just looking at cash benefits and people in a long-term facility to several other forms of receiving assistance. And before we go in further into what those forms are, I want to be really clear that people who are not, these are not applicable, and this is something that is by law, are refugees, asylees, survivors of domestic violence. So for Buffalo in particular, we have a ton of refugees and a ton of asylees here. And so these changes that are happening at the federal level do not affect their ability to get public benefits. So I want to be really clear about that, because the reality of this type of rule change, oftentimes we see not just the people who are meant to be affected by the rule, but it goes much farther to all of the people who are afraid now that their status is somehow going to be affected, and we've seen people unenroll already. So it's really important for people to be specific about what their status is. This also doesn't have anything to do with naturalization. So that's another thing that people have said, is this is going to be applied when you're applying to become a citizen. That is not the case. There's lots of other restrictions right now and different ways that they're scrutinizing naturalization, but this rule in particular is not a part of that. So it's just for people who are right now applying to become legal permanent residents. And we've seen the leaked rule that was in the past, it was much more expansive. But we did have a lot of people at the national and local level doing a lot of advocacy. We had our state government as well as state elected officials talking about what the fiscal implications of this would be. So the rule right now, as horrific as it is much more reduced. So it's only talking about people getting Section 8, people getting SNAP, people getting Medicaid, and Medicare Part D. So it is limited, much more limited than we have seen in the past. And the other important thing is this is a proposed rule. So it has not gone into effect and it will not be retroactive. So there's no need for people to unenroll in benefits right now. It's, really at this point where we know what it is. We're going to have a 60-day comment period. So we'll be asking all of our partners to comment on the horrific implications of this and why we do not want this to be a rule. And we'll see what kind of effects those might have.
But just to be clear, this wouldn't apply to immigrants who've already come on certain visas and maybe have used some of these benefits and would be applying for green cards 2 and 3 years from now. Is that right? Or is it just for new arrivals in the future if it passes?
So it's a little bit complicated. So it's people who are applying to become a legal permanent resident. So there are some visas like student visas or like work visas that when you apply for those, you're not applying to be a legal permanent resident. However, after you've lived here, you might be then applying to become a legal permanent resident. So it is at that point when you're applying to become a legal permanent resident that they will look at these things. And right now, emphasizing that they're not going to look before the rule was instated.
Okay.
So there's nothing people, if you've used, SNAP in the past, or if you've had Section 8, or if you do have Section 8, there's no reason to change those things right now. It's only if the rule does get put into effect will those changes happen. And we've done a lot of work to create community-facing materials because these are super complicated concepts, and to figure out, does this apply to you or does this not apply to you? So we're happy to share some of those like one-pagers that have some graphics on them, and they're in, I think, at least 4 or 5 different languages now that we can share with folks so that people are getting the right information.
Okay. And yeah, feel free to share now where folks can get those resources, and then we can add the links to our ppgbuffalo.org website and our Facebook.
Yeah, so if you go to thenyic.org/public charge, there will be a whole lot of information there. So it has those graphics. It also has some of our latest press releases, as well as some more detailed analysis and who to contact if you'd like more information.
And so just to be clear, Megan, with what this would look like in the future, what's at stake for a rule like this going through, I'm curious if there are any timing issues that are taken into account. So say an immigrant family comes to the U.S. under a certain type of visa that they can later apply for a permanent legal residency, and they come upon a hard time where one parent loses their job and they decide to get SNAP food assistance benefits that they only use for 3 months. Is that something that under the rule would be held against them?
So the way that the public charge is supposed to be assessed is it's supposed to be a totality of circumstances is the way that they're supposed to assess it. And I think that right now it's really hard to apply to specific cases because it's not in effect. And we have hopes that we'd be able to have an effect on the final rule. I think the important message right now is that essentially this is making mothers and fathers choose between, providing a safe home for their kids to be able to have some assistance to pay for rent, or to have sometime in the future, sometimes 10 or 15 years in the future, having a legal status. And that decision is impossible, and for many people who have status currently or who, are now thriving, contributing members of our communities, the reality is that at some point we all go through hard times and we've had to depend on those. And, you know, for us, we believe in a state and a country where we do support folks when they're going through those hard times, and that we believe that kids should be able to have nutritious meals every day, right? And so that should be, you know, regardless of what their parents' status is, and their parents shouldn't be put in a place where they have to make those decisions.
And I think that relates to a point that both of you have kind of already made, that when immigrants thrive, everyone thrives, that we shouldn't be defining people just by their immigrant status, but that the rights that they should be entitled to benefit all of us and are the rights that we want guaranteed for everyone living here too. So Jennifer, it'd be great to hear from you on kind of other issues that are coming up for migrant families and other ways that Western New Yorkers can kind of step up locally to support families.
Yeah, so it can be very overwhelming to hear about the wave after wave of federal policy that's really targeting immigrants and trying to create a climate of fear. And so to that end, I think that we need to do everything that we can that's within our powers to push back on the harm that they're trying to create, and also to push back on the fear as well and create margins of safety where we can create them. So we do have ways for people locally to step up and take part. I mentioned earlier 3 areas that we work in. So in accompaniment, one of the ways that people have contributed locally is by just showing up for court when someone has a court date. And it can really make a difference when a judge, an immigration judge, looks in the courtroom and see that this is not a lone person. It's a person who is part of a community, which people are. They're part of a community. So it's really important that we're able to show that to them. And we have a program. We have a program for people to be trained in doing court support. And you can access that through our website, which will be in the show notes, but also it's at www.justiceformigrantfamilies.org, as are a lot of links to this work that I'm about to talk about. So in partnership with Court Support, we've also are doing visitation to people who are already in detention, in immigration detention. So we do have a detention facility outside of Buffalo, but it's actually in Batavia, which is about 40 minutes away. And I don't recall how many people are there. Do you recall, Megan?
630.
Yes. Okay, so 630. And people, that includes people who are detained in New York, but also people who are detained in other states, people who are sent up from the border. It includes a lot of different people who are there who interacted with immigration enforcement for a variety of reasons and a variety of circumstances. And so we have a program to visit with people, provide some emotional support, a community link, and where it makes sense, also to connect with different resources that they're entitled to or that they can have access to. And again, we have training for that. So if people are interested in this type of work, we do have an upcoming training, so contact us through our website. And then interpretation is a third need. So for example, in recent times we have been asked to assist in interpretation for so asylum seekers who arrive are not guaranteed interpretation for their interviews, so they're applying to show why they needed to come here, but they're not necessarily provided with interpretation, so that's one area. But then there's a lot of other community events, but also appointments and different types of interactions in the community where interpretation is really, really helpful. So those 3 areas: court support, visiting people at the detention center, and interpretation are areas of great need. And we're always, I would be remiss if I don't say we're always fundraising for families. And most of the money that we fundraise is going directly to families currently, and you can donate through our website. And in particular, we are fundraising for a family of asylum seekers right now, one of whom's in detention. And so, yes, that fundraising is always a need in this community. But a second area is through advocacy and organizing. And we do work to change the unjust system, not just to meet its needs. And on the city level, that means working with the Our City Coalition, which works on issues of gentrification and displacement. So immigration enforcement is a huge way that people are displaced because they're literally removed from our community. And so we're working with the Our City Coalition on ways we can work together across issues of housing, education, policing, across many issues, and show how immigration is a part of that, and say we want to keep people in our community. They're our valued community members. And secondly, on a state-wide level, we are working on the driver's license campaign, which is a really concrete way, again, that we could create a margin of safety for people, which, as I said before, there's all of these ways just create this margin of safety and push back on harm that is actively being done. But should I last?
Yeah, I think one more thing on linking up all these issues is Thursday's event, which will look at immigration and labor rights connected.
Yes. So with all of this, it is really complicated. Come out and educate yourself, bring people, and be educated on what is immigration, what does it mean, and what has it meant in our country. So Aviva Chomsky, and she is the daughter of Noam Chomsky, if you're wondering. She's the professor of history and a coordinator of Latin American studies. And she's the author of 2 books, well, many more than 2 books, but I'm going to highlight 2 books. One is They Take Our Jobs and 20 Other Myths About Immigration, which summed up in 2 lines: immigrants don't take jobs and they do pay taxes. She's going to talk about a lot more than that, but that's a kernel. And another book, Undocumented, How Immigration Became Illegal, which, going back to some things we said earlier, looks at how we even came to this place and who is undocumented and what does that even mean, because that's a long conversation. So she will be at Trinity Church, 371 Delaware Avenue, 7 o'clock on Thursday, September 27th. We'd love to see you there.
Perfect. And thank you so much to Megan and Jennifer for joining us. And they've both shared information about their organizations, and we'll post more information on getting involved. So thank you. Any last words to add?
No, just thank you so much for having us, and look forward to folks getting involved. For me, the New York Immigration Coalition, you can find us on Twitter at the NYIC. And for follow-up on the public charge information, it's on our website, the nyc.org/public-charge.
Thank you. So this is Andrea O'Sullivan with Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG, which unites 275 organizations working to build a better Buffalo. Join us next week, Tuesday, October 2nd, when we will be hearing from members of the Buffalo Police Advisory Board here on the Public Good. It's the Public Good, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. on Power 96.5 FM and Mix 1080 AM.